Let's have an update on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. We need the latest. The Gaza truce will take effect on Sunday morning, and it will take in effect at 8:30 a.m. local time, seeing the release of dozens of hostages held in Gaza and hundreds of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. Let's talk to Carne Ross, former head of Middle East policy for the UK mission to the United Nations and former head of the Arab Israel desk at the Foreign Office. Carne, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What do we know about what's going on right now and what the procedure is to get this long-awaited ceasefire actually up and running by Sunday morning?
Well, the procedure is the parties have agreed to it, so they just need to stop fighting. They also need to prepare for the prisoner release on the Israeli side and for the hostage release on the Hamas side. However, I think there's plenty of reason for anxiety about the future of this deal. There are many, many details that could go wrong, many mutual commitments which are not so much open to interpretation, but more open to being presented as breaches of the ceasefire. And I'm afraid to say Israel, and particularly Netanyahu, let's name names here, has plenty of incentives to bring this ceasefire deal down.
What are they?
Well, it's the same incentive that led Israel to resist a ceasefire deal, led Netanyahu to resist a ceasefire deal, which is his political future is at stake. Everybody knows that the far-right ministers in his cabinet have vowed to resign if the deal goes ahead. That will bring his coalition down. If his coalition goes down, then he becomes, well, no longer prime minister, but because of that, also potentially subject to trial over corruption. So his personal future is very much at stake with this ceasefire. And that, I'm afraid, doesn't produce an incentive structure for him to continue the ceasefire, rather the opposite. And the bar for him to be able to blame Hamas for breaching the ceasefire is pretty low. Because in America, the US has already made clear that they believe Hamas resisted a ceasefire deal, which I don't think is actually true. And I think many commentators in Israel don't believe is true, in that Netanyahu resisted the deal that's been on the table, as we all know, from May. But that environment, that political environment in the US, particularly with the new administration, means that it will be pretty easy for Israel to claim that it is Hamas who has breached the ceasefire terms.
Right, it sounds as if you're almost kind of nixing this deal before it's even had a chance to come to fruition. Why don't we focus instead on the mechanics of what's got to happen to bring it about? And obviously, this all was precipitated by the massacre on October the 7th and the seizing of hostages of all different ages and stages. And what is the story about returning those hostages?
Well, Vanessa, I'm not nixing the deal. Obviously, like everybody, I hope that it goes ahead. I'm just saying there are many reasons for anxiety. And part of the reason I say that is because we all need to be watching very, very closely. We can't take our eye off the ball. This deal was stitched up by Qatar, the US, and Egypt together. They remain the guarantors of the deal, the monitors of the deal. It doesn't take a genius to see that only one of those countries is very powerful. The other two, what is their real capacity to monitor this deal? I don't know. There are no troops on the ground. There are still no Western journalists on the ground to see what's really going on. You're absolutely right to focus on the hostages, as we must, on the civilian suffering in Gaza, which has been immense, and on the part of the hostages' families as well. That is a first step. It's not the only step in the ceasefire. There will be further releases of hostages, including IDF hostages, Israeli military hostages, down the line, but those have to be reciprocated by releases of Palestinian prisoners by Israel. And as you know, there was a last-minute hitch in the negotiations of the deal. That was about the identity of certain Palestinian prisoners. So that's a possible friction point that we may expect, is that too will become a problem. And if that happens, that will jeopardize further hostage releases. But the initial hostage releases should happen very quickly.
And do we know yet, do we have any kind of indication how many of those hostages will be alive and how many of them will be returns of body bags with dead bodies in?
No, we don't.
We have no idea yet, do we?
They are held by different groups to start with, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad as well as Hamas. They themselves may not have an absolutely clear idea. This is, of course, is going to be devastating when it emerges how many have died. But this cuts both ways in Israeli politics. Of course, it will intensify rage over what has happened, but that rage will be partly directed at the government for not having secured this release much sooner, where it's evident that this deal was available much sooner than now.
And if it should it, and let's all pray that it does. I can't believe there's anybody listening to me on LBC right now who doesn't pray that this comes to an end and a resolution, as fast as possible. It's gone on far, far too long already. Of course, we all know that. If it goes smoothly, insofar as such a complex and delicate situation can go smoothly, what's meant to happen after the next 42 days or the next kind of increments of time? Is there meant to be a dismantling of the whole thing permanently, or is this one of those temporary ceasefires that's never envisaged to take hold and last?
Well, we don't really know several crucial elements, such as who will run the Gaza Strip if it's not to be Hamas. Who will it be? There's lots of loose talk about peacekeeping forces or even mercenary forces that might do this. I don't see either as a realistic option. It should be Palestinians themselves governing themselves. The role of UNRWA is also in question because Israel continues to attack UNRWA, make its operations more difficult. They are the only agency that can provide for the humanitarian welfare of the Palestinian people. But also there are bigger questions at stake, of course, as well, about the whole future of the Israel-Palestine issue. Again, countries like Britain say, oh, we must see a resumption of a political process towards a Palestinian state and all this kind of thing. That has not been mapped out at all. And indeed, Israel has made clear, this Israeli government, and indeed the majority of the Israeli body politics, you only have to see the Israeli press, I'm not making this up, don't want a Palestinian state. They've made that absolutely clear. So it's going to be very difficult. And perhaps the bulk of the Palestinian people don't want a two-state solution either. Of course, they want a Palestinian state. They don't want a two-state solution. But we don't really know because the Palestinians don't have a legitimate political voice. Hamas doesn't speak for everybody, although their popularity has increased because of the war. Certainly, the Palestinian Authority doesn't speak for all Palestinians. There haven't been elections for years and years and years. So the Palestinians need to be given space to develop their own united political platform to put forward the genuine shared wishes of the collective Palestinian people. That needs to happen. That's not going to happen quickly.